A step on any of these stairs could cost you your life. So today I'm counting down 15 of the downright scariest stairs in the world. 15, 740 steps wedged in a crack. About 2 hours east of Medellin, out on the flat, green Colombian countryside, like a fist punched up through the earth, there's this enormous granite monolith, El Peñón de Guadape. It rises about 650 feet off the plain, a single smooth dome of rock with almost nothing growing on it. From a distance, it looks like a stone that got dropped there by accident. There's one natural feature that made it climbable. A long vertical fissure splits the side of the rock, top to bottom, kind of like a seam. And somebody looked at that crack and decided to build a staircase into it. So they laid 740 steps of brick and concrete straight up the fissure, zigzagging back and forth inside the gap in the stone. It's a spine of stairs poured into a wound in the rock. The whole thing clings to the inside of the crack, switching direction every dozen steps or so, the masonry following the natural line of the split. The climb is exactly as relentless as it sounds. The steps are narrow and they keep turning, so you never see more than a short flight ahead of you before the next bend. There's a railing now, a metal cage running up the outside, but the angle is steep and it doesn't let up. You climb, you turn, you climb, you turn. 740 times. The brick is worn smooth in the middle of each step from the millions of feet that have come before. And on a hot day, the concrete throws the heat straight back at you. From a distance, the whole staircase looks like a scar that runs up the face of the rock. Up close, it's just a tunnel of switchbacks, and you stop counting somewhere around 300. At the top, there's a viewing tower, a few stacked levels of concrete platforms built right onto the summit. And the view is the reason anybody does this. Lakes everywhere. The Guadape Reservoir below is shattered into 1,000 fingers and islands, green water threading between green hills in every direction, stretching all the way out to the horizon. From up there, the flooded valley looks like cracked glass laid flat across the land. Then you have to go back down, and the descent, predictably, is worse than the ascent. Your knees know exactly how far down it is and that they'd like you to know that they did not agree to this. About 30,000 people make the climb every year, and most of them do it without thinking too hard about the 740 steps until they're already standing on step 400, wondering whose idea this was. Number 14, the Chand Baori Stepwell. In the village of Abhaneri, about 60 miles east of Jaipur, there's a hole in the ground that goes down 13 stories. That's the short description. The actual thing is harder to process. Looking down into the Chand Baori Stepwell from the rim is kind of like looking into an M.C. Escher drawing. 3,500 narrow stone steps arranged in perfect geometric symmetry on 3 sides of a square shaft, each tier stepping slightly inward as it descends, the whole structure narrowing into shadow somewhere far below. It was built around the 9th century, commissioned by a local ruler, Raja Chanda, and the name has held for over 1,000 years. Baori is the Rajasthani word for stepwell, a structure type developed specifically to solve the problem of seasonal water access in a desert environment. As the water table drops through the dry months, you need a way to reach it. The solution was to build a staircase into the ground deep enough that the lowest levels stayed within reach of the water year-round. 30 meters down, 13 stories, 3,500 steps. The geometry is the thing. 3 sides of the shaft are entirely steps, arranged in a precise inverted triangle configuration that produces perfect symmetry when viewed from above. The 4th side is different. Carved stone pavilions stacked at intervals all the way down, galleries and archways, and decorative stonework that served as meeting places, resting points, shade. The whole interior is technically an architectural space. People didn't just draw water here. They came to conduct business, to shelter from the heat, to spend time below ground where the temperature dropped. The steps themselves are worn sandstone, the treads rounded by centuries of use, some of the risers tilted out of level. No handrails. The structure predates that particular concern by roughly 1,000 years. At the lower levels, the steps are in permanent shadow and the stone stays damp from proximity to the water below. The walls rise around you as you descend, and the noise and light from the surface reduce gradually until both are gone. A fall from the upper levels would end on stone, not water. At the bottom, there's a small pool. Dark, still, cold. It's what the whole thing was for. The stepwell stopped functioning as a water source a long time ago and is now a protected archaeological site, but descent is still permitted. Visitors can go all the way down. Fewer do than intend to. The worn stone, the narrowing geometry, the drop, it has a way of producing, somewhere around the 7th or 8th story, a quiet recalibration of ambition. 13. The wettest climb on the list. In the cloud forests of central Ecuador, where the Rio Pastaza drops out of the Andes toward the Amazon basin, there's a waterfall called Pilon del Diablo, the Devil's Cauldron. It's one of the tallest waterfalls in the country, somewhere around 260 feet of water falling into a churning basin of rock, and somebody decided the way to experience it was to build a stone staircase that takes you right up into the spray. The trail starts down in the gorge near the town of Rio Verde, a steep walk through dense green forest. Then the stairs begin. Narrow stone and concrete steps cut into the canyon wall, switchbacking down and around toward the base of the falls. They were built by hand, the masonry following the contours of the rock, hugging the cliff as it descends toward the water. And the closer you get, the wetter everything becomes. This is the whole point of the place. The noise here is deafening, the spray is constant, and the rocks are perpetually wet and slippery. There's a section near the bottom where the path passes behind and beside the falling water, and at one point you're standing in a carved-out cave with the river pouring over the opening in front of you like a liquid wall. To get through parts of it, you have to duck. There's a tunnel so low and tight you basically crawl through the rock to come out near the cauldron itself. The stone never dries. The mist coats every surface, the handrails, the steps, your hands, and the constant roar means you can really hear the person next to you. The steps are uneven, some tall, some shallow, all of them slick. There's metal cabling bolted along the worst stretches to hold onto, and you hold onto it. At the bottom, you reach the viewing platforms, built right at the level of the basin where the water lands. From there, you watch 260 feet of river slam into the rock and explode upward, the whole cauldron boiling white, the spray rising back up past you into the trees. There's a separate platform reached by a swinging suspension bridge that crosses the gorge for a head-on view of the drop. So, the stairs here at Pilon del Diablo are not the highest on this list, not the steepest, they're not the most exposed, but they are the wettest. And most visitors arrive back at the top, dripping wet, slightly deaf, and grinning in the way that only people who have just done something mildly reckless and gotten away with it can grin. At number 12, the stone steps of Skellig Michael, off the southwest coast of Ireland, rising from the grey Atlantic about 8 miles out from County Kerry. There's a jagged pyramid of rock that comes almost to a point 700 feet above the sea. Skellig Michael, 2 peaks of bare stone with the ocean breaking white around the base. No harbor, no shelter, nothing soft about it. And cut into the side of it is a staircase that monks built over 1,000 years ago. Sometime around the 6th or 7th century, a group of Christian monks decided this rock was where they wanted to live. So they hauled stone and they built 3 separate flights of steps climbing from the landing points up toward a monastery near the summit. Roughly 618 ancient stone steps, dry stacked, no mortar, each one set by hand into the steep face of the island. At the top, they built beehive-shaped stone huts that are still standing. They lived up there for around 600 years. The steps are exactly what they were when they were laid. Uneven slabs of stone, different heights, different depths, polished by centuries of weather and feet, with the rock falling way beside them toward the water. There's no railing, there never was. In places, the steps run along an exposed ridge where the drop goes down both sides and the wind comes off the Atlantic with nothing to break it for thousands of miles. When it's wet, which is often, the stone turns slick. The island closes to visitors entirely when the swell is too high to land a boat. And it's high. By the time you're near the top, you're around 700 feet above the sea on hand-cut steps with sheer exposure, and the only thing between you and the water is your own footing. At the top, there's the monastery, a cluster of those corbelled stone huts and a small oratory ringed by a low wall perched on a shoulder of the peak. From up there, it's open ocean in every direction. The smaller island of Little Skellig across the water white with thousands of nesting gannets, and the mainland a thin line on the horizon. These days, access is tightly controlled. Boats are limited, the season is short, and a guide count keeps numbers low. Only a few hundred people are permitted to land on any given day, weather allowing. Plenty of days the weather doesn't allow, and the boats just turn around. 11. Where the monkeys own the mountain. Near Krabi in southern Thailand, there's a limestone hill rising out of the jungle with a golden Buddha sitting on top of it, and the only way up is a staircase that climbs the bare rock at an angle that does not look survivable from the bottom. Wat Tom Sua, Tiger Cave Temple. From the base, you tilt your head back and the steps just keep going, up and up, until they vanish into the haze near the summit. The temple itself sits in a cave complex at the bottom, a working Buddhist monastery named for a tiger paw print said to have been found in the rock. But the thing people come for is the climb to the summit shrine. 1,260 steps of concrete, poured straight up the side of the karst, following the steepest line to the top. There's a handrail, a metal pipe running up the side, and you will use it. The steps are irregular. Some are normal height. Some are tall enough that you're lifting your knee toward your chest to make the next one, and the whole thing keeps pitching steeper as you go up. There's no real shade. In the heat and the humidity of southern Thailand, the concrete radiates warmth and the climb turns into a slow grind, where you stop counting and just watch the next 10 steps. And then there are the macaques. Troops of monkeys live on the hill, and they've long since worked out that climbers carry bags, and bags carry food and water and phones. They sit on the railings, they watch you, and they're entirely unimpressed by you. Some are bold enough to grab. The signs warn you not to bring food. Not that everyone reads them. At the top, 1,260 steps up, there's a large golden Buddha statue and a flat platform that wraps around the summit. From there, the view opens out across the whole province. Flat green plains studded with those same dramatic limestone towers rising straight out of the ground. The coastline somewhere beyond. The jungle running to the horizon in every direction. On a clear day, you can see for miles. But yeah, the monkeys are still there for the way down. They're still watching and still amused, and your quadriceps are going to remind you what you did for approximately the next 3 to 4 days. Number 10, 999 steps to a hole in the rock. Mount Tianmen in the Zhangjiajie region of Hunan province, China, is one of those mountains that doesn't look real. It rises straight out of the landscape, and near the summit, there's an enormous natural arch punched clean through the rock. A hole in the mountain about 430 feet tall and 190 feet wide. They call it Heaven's Gate, and the way you reach it is a staircase running straight up the slope to the opening. 999 steps. That number isn't an accident. In Chinese tradition, the number 9 is associated with the eternal, with the heavens, and 9 repeated carries weight, so the staircase to Heaven's Gate was set at 999. The steps climb the final stretch of mountain in a steep straight run up to the base of the arch. Gray stone laid in a broad flight with railings down the sides. And it's steep. The pitch on the upper section is severe enough that looking up from the bottom, the steps seem to stack almost vertically, one above the next, the whole flight tilting back toward the gate. There's a handrail and the steps are wide and well built, but the grade does not relent, and the altitude up here means you're working for air by the time you're partway up. People stop. They stand on the steps catching their breath and looking up at how much is left, which is a lot. Below all of this, getting to the staircase at all involves what's billed as one of the longest cable car rides in the world, and a road of 99 hairpin bends carved into the mountainside. So you arrive at the foot of the steps already somewhere high and strange. Through the arch at the top, the gate frames open sky and the green peaks beyond, and from the platform at the base of the opening, the view runs back down the staircase and out across the folded mountains of Zhangjiajie. The arch itself goes clear through the rock, daylight on both sides. The current setup also offers an escalator system and a glass walkway elsewhere on the mountain for those who'd rather not take the steps. Plenty choose them. The 999 though are still the route that actually means something, and the only one that makes you earn the gate. 9. The mirror wall and the vertical climb. In the middle of Sri Lanka, on the dry plains north of Kandy, there's a column of rock standing about 600 feet straight up out of the flat jungle. Sigiriya. Lion Rock. It's a hardened plug of magma from an old volcano, sheer on every side, and around 1500 years ago, a king decided to put his palace on top of it. The king was Kashyapa, and the date is roughly the 5th century. He built a royal citadel up there, gardens and walls at the base, and a fortress on the summit reached by a climb up the rock face. To get visitors past the worst of it, his builders ran walkways and stairways up the side, and at one point you pass between the paws of an enormous lion carved into the rock, a gateway the whole staircase was named for. About 1,200 steps in total carry you to the top. The modern route is a mix of old stone and bolted on metal. Narrow spiral staircases of steel cling to the bare rock face, taking you out over the drop to reach a sheltered pocket of cliff covered in 1,500-year-old frescoes. Then there's the mirror wall, a polished surface that once shone like glass. The steps are steep, the cages are open to the air, and on the exposed sections, the wind pushes at you with 600 feet of nothing below. There's also the wildlife. Hornets nest in the rock, and signs warn climbers to stay quiet near certain sections because a disturbed nest on an open staircase is its own kind of problem. If you're enjoying the video, drop a like and a comment. It really does help the channel out. At the top, spread across nearly 3 acres of summit, are the foundations of Kashyapa's palace. The brick outlines of rooms, cisterns cut into the stone, a throne platform, and the remains of terrace gardens. From up there, the jungle runs flat and green to the horizon in every direction. Kashyapa's reign didn't last. He lost his kingdom in battle around the year 495. And after his death, the site became a Buddhist monastery for centuries before it was abandoned to the forest entirely. The stairs you climb today are the route back up to a palace its builder only held for a handful of years. 8. A straight line up the cliff. On the South Atlantic island of St. Helena, one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth, a volcanic speck roughly 1,200 miles off the coast of Africa, there's a staircase that runs in a single dead straight line up the side of a cliff. They call it Jacob's Ladder. From the bottom of the valley in the island's tiny capital, Jamestown, it climbs the steep ridge to the fort above without a single bend or landing the whole way. They built it in 1829. Originally, it wasn't even stairs. It was an inclined plane, a cable tramway used to haul goods and manure up the ridge and bring produce back down between the town and the fortifications on the heights. Eventually, the tramway came out and the steps stayed. 699 of them, set in one continuous straight flight up the slope. And the pitch is the thing. The staircase climbs around 600 feet over that single run, and the grade is steep enough that from the bottom it reads almost like a ladder leaned against the hillside. The steps are stone and concrete, fairly shallow front to back, with a metal handrail down each side. There are no landings to break it up. You just start climbing and the ground falls away behind you, and the town shrinks below while the line of steps ahead barely seems to shorten. There's no shade and no shelter on the climb. The handrails are there and people use them on the way down especially, because looking down a straight 600-foot run of steps does something to your sense of balance that the way up doesn't. At the top, you reach the remains of the old fortifications on Ladder Hill, and the view drops back down the full length of the staircase. The narrow cleft of Jamestown wedged between its valley walls, the rooftops far below, and beyond them the open Atlantic running out flat to the horizon with nothing on it. Local kids have been known to climb the railings and slide down the outside, arms hooked over the rails, the whole 600 feet. There's an annual race up the steps too, and the fastest recorded times come in at well under 6 minutes for all 699. Number 7, 4,444 wooden steps. Deep in the Lisa Fjord in southwestern Norway, where steep walls of dark rock drop straight into still black water, there's a tiny settlement called Flørli. And running up the mountainside above it is a wooden staircase that climbs from the water's edge nearly to the top of the plateau in one enormous unbroken run. The staircase exists because of a hydroelectric plant. The old power station at Flørli ran water down through pipes from a lake high on the plateau, and the wooden steps were built alongside those penstock pipes as a service route, the way workers got up and down to maintain the line. 4,444 steps, running right up the slope beside the pipe. When the plant was modernized, the steps were left, and they became a hiking route instead. So, here's the scale of it. 4,444 steps. The Empire State Building has 1,576. The Eiffel Tower, around 1,665. The Flørli Stairs have nearly 3 times as many, climbing from sea level to about 2,300 feet up at the top. The steps are wood, fixed to the steep mountainside, and they get steeper as they go. The upper section runs at a brutal pitch right alongside the steel pipeline, open on the sides with the fjord dropping further and further below you the higher you climb. There's no railing for long stretches, no exit halfway, no shortcut down. Once you start, the only ways off are up to the top or back down every step you came. From the plateau at the top, the view runs straight down the length of the Lisa Fjord, the water far below, the cliffs on the far side, the green tops of the mountains rolling away inland. You can see the little cluster of Flørli at the bottom looking impossibly small. It's billed as the longest wooden staircase in the world. Most people who climb it loop back down on a hiking trail rather than face 4,444 steps in reverse, which tells you something about how the descent looks from the top. The longest stairway in the world. Number 6. In the Bernese Alps of Switzerland, there's a pyramid-shaped peak called Mount Niesen that rises above Lake Thun, and bolted to its flank, running almost the entire height of the mountain, is a service staircase with 11,674 steps. It holds the record as the longest stairway in the world. It runs right next to a funicular railway, climbing the mountain step for step beside the tracks. Like Flørli, it's there for maintenance. The Niesen funicular has carried passengers up the mountain since 1910, and the staircase was built alongside it so crews could service the line and the rails. It's not a public path. For all but one day of the year, the steps are closed and the only people on them are workers. That one day is the exception. Once a year, the mountain hosts a stair race, the Niesenlauf, and a limited field of runners is allowed onto the staircase to go up all 11,674 steps. The climb gains roughly 5,400 vertical feet, close to a mile straight up, over that single run beside the funicular. The steps are open metal and stone exposed on the mountainside, climbing through changing weather as you gain altitude. What starts in alpine meadow at the bottom finishes in thin, cold air near the summit, and the grade never really eases. Runners describe the upper third as a slow-motion grind where the body just keeps voting to stop. At the top, there's a mountain restaurant and a viewing terrace at the summit station, and the view opens across Lake Thun far below, the town of Spiez on its shore, and the high snow peaks of the Bernese Oberland, the Eiger, the Mönch, the Jungfrau, lined up across the horizon. The current record for racing up all of it is just over an hour. That's an achievement so physically extraordinary it does border on the medically inadvisable. 5. The peak behind the postcard. Everybody knows the photograph of Machu Picchu, the ancient Inca city on its green saddle high in the Peruvian Andes. But look at almost any picture of it and there's a steep, pointed peak rising behind the ruins, towering over them. That peak is Huayna Picchu, and cut into the side of it is a set of Inca stone steps so severe they've earned the nickname the Stairs of Death. The Inca built them in the 15th century, around the same time as the city itself. The steps climb the back of that peak to shrines and terraces the Inca constructed near the very top, carved straight into the granite. They've been there roughly 500 years, worn by weather and feet, and they were never designed with a modern idea of a safe margin in mind. The climb is short but vicious. The steps are narrow, uneven, and absurdly steep. In places, the pitch is so sharp you're climbing what's essentially a stone ladder with your hands, gripping the steps above while your feet search for the ones below. The granite is often wet from cloud and mist that rolls through the peak. There are sections with a steel cable to hold and sections with nothing, where the rock drops away hundreds of feet straight down to the valley floor and the river below. There's a reason access is now controlled. Only a few hundred people are permitted up Huayna Picchu each day on timed entry, with names logged at a checkpoint at the bottom. The logbook is partly so they know who went up, and, more to the point, who hasn't come back down. At the top, there are Inca terraces and the remains of a temple, perched on the summit with the whole site of Machu Picchu spread out far below. The stone city in miniature, the surrounding peaks, the Urubamba River winding around the base in a tight loop. So going down is the part nobody warns you about enough. On steps this steep, descending means facing into the rock and backing down much of it, because turning to face outward over that drop is more than most people's nerves will allow. Number 4. The mountain you climb before dawn. In central Sri Lanka, rising out of the highlands as a near-perfect cone, there's a peak called Adam's Peak, known locally as Sri Pada, the sacred footprint. It stands a little over 7,000 feet, and at the summit there's a rock formation that's been venerated for over 1,000 years, a footprint-shaped mark that Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, and Christians have each claimed as sacred for centuries. And the way pilgrims reach it is a staircase of thousands of steps that climbs the mountain in the dark. The stairs have been a pilgrimage route for well over 1,000 years. Over time, they were formalized into a built path, roughly 5,500 steps of stone and concrete winding up the steep upper slopes to the temple at the very top. The road is lined with handrails and, during the season, with small tea stalls and resting points where climbers stop on the way up. So the climb is done at night, on purpose. Pilgrims and trekkers start in the small hours, often around 2 in the morning, and climb in the dark so they reach the summit for sunrise. The steps vary constantly, some shallow, some tall, some uneven, and the upper sections get steep enough that the railings stop being decorative and start being the thing you're hauling on. In the cool dark, it's manageable. By the final stretch, the steps come one slow flight after another, and your legs and your lungs stop agreeing with each other. During the pilgrimage season, from about December to May, the whole route is lit, a chain of lights running up the mountainside that you can see from far below, a thread of light climbing into the night sky. At the top, there's the small temple that houses the sacred footprint, a bell that summit reachers ring, and a platform where the crowd gathers facing east. And then the sun comes up. On a clear morning, the peak throws a perfect triangular shadow across the clouds and the land to the west, a phenomenon people climb all night specifically to see. Going down in daylight is its own revelation. You finally see the drops you climbed past in the dark, the sheer pitch of the steps you took on faith, and the long line of the staircase falling away below you all the way back down to where you started. 3. 2,000 railroad ties up a slope. Just west of Colorado Springs, on the flank of Pikes Peak, there's a scar running dead straight up the mountainside that looks, from a distance, like somebody set a ladder against the slope and walked away. That's the Manitou Incline. It climbs about 2,000 vertical feet in under a mile, and the steps are the old wooden ties of a railway that doesn't exist anymore. The track was built in 1907. Originally, it was a cable car line, a funicular that hauled materials up the mountain to a hydroelectric plant and a reservoir near the top, and later carried tourists up for the view. It ran for decades. Then, in 1990, a rock slide washed out a section of the track, and the railway was shut down for good. The cars and the rails were pulled out, but the ties stayed, bolted into the mountainside, and what was left was a staircase of roughly 2,700 railroad ties running straight up the grade, and people started climbing it. The pitch is the whole story here. On average, the incline climbs at around a 45% grade, and in one stretch near the top, it hits something closer to 68%, steep enough that the ties rise almost to chest height, and climbers end up using their hands. The steps aren't uniform either. Some ties are tall, some are rotted out and missing, some are spaced awkwardly, and there's a false summit partway up that breaks people's spirits when they realize how much is still above them. For years, technically, climbing it was illegal. The land crossed private and public boundaries, and the route was officially closed, which didn't stop anyone. People climbed it anyway for the workout, treating trespassing tickets as the cost of the exercise. Eventually, the city and its partners sorted out the access agreements, and the Manitou Incline opened as a legal, managed trail. There's no view to speak of for most of it, just the ties ahead and the ground falling away behind. At the top, around 8,600 feet of elevation, the grade finally releases onto a ridge with the city of Colorado Springs spread out on the plain far below and the bulk of Pikes Peak rising behind. So, here's the part that says everything. You can't go back down the way you came. Descending the ties is dangerous enough that it's discouraged, and most people take a separate trail, the Bar Trail, that switchbacks 3 miles down the mountain to get back to a place that was less than a mile away in a straight line. 2. The chain is all you've got. Mount Hua, Huashan, is one of China's 5 great sacred mountains, rising in Shanxi province as a cluster of sheer granite peaks with almost vertical faces on every side. For centuries, it was a place of Taoist temples and hermits, reached only by those willing to climb. And somewhere on the way up, there's a stretch so notorious it has its own reputation worldwide, a path of wooden planks bolted to a vertical cliff with a chain to hold and a few hundred feet of open air below your heels. People have been climbing Huashan for well over 1,000 years. The Taoists who built temples and shrines on these peaks cut steps and routes directly into the rock to reach them, and over the centuries, those routes were extended and worn deeper by pilgrims. The mountain has 5 main peaks, and the trails connecting them range from steep stone staircases to the infamous plank walk, the Chongkong Jiandao, fixed to the side of the south peak. So here's how the worst of it is actually built. In places, the stairs are cut so steeply into the granite that they're less stairs than notches, toe holds in a near vertical face, with chains bolted to the rock on either side as the only handhold. There's one section, sometimes called the Heavenly Stairs, where the rock pitches up to something close to vertical and the steps narrow to slots barely wide enough for the front of your foot. You climb it facing the stone, both hands on the chains, hauling yourself up between the links. And then there's the plank walk. Wooden boards maybe a foot wide, bolted end to end along the cliff face with iron pegs hammered into the rock beneath them for your feet. A chain runs along the wall at chest height. That's it. On one side, solid granite. On the other, nothing. A straight drop down the mountain. Modern climbers clip a harness to the chain now, which wasn't always the case, but the boards themselves are the same narrow ledge they've always been, and you have to pass people coming the other way on the same planks. At the top of these routes are the peaks themselves. Temple pavilions, a Taoist tea house on the south peak, carved inscriptions in the rock, and views straight down sheer granite walls into the valleys and the haze beyond. The other peaks rising around you like islands. There is no camera angle that makes the Heavenly Stairs look safe, and there's no tourist infrastructure that softens the experience. It's just you, the stone, the chains, and the oldest, deepest, most fundamental question a staircase can ask. Do you trust the next step? Number 1, the Haiku Stairs. On the island of Oahu in Hawaii, running up the back of the Kulau mountain range, there's a staircase that climbs a knife-edge ridge into the clouds. They call it the Stairway to Heaven. The official name is the Haiku Stairs, and for decades it was the single most sought-after illegal climb in the islands. A near-vertical ladder of metal steps bolted to a green volcanic spine, with the ground falling away on both sides into the valleys far below. It started as a military installation. During the Second World War, the US Navy needed to string antenna cables across the Haiku Valley for a radio station that could transmit to ships across the Pacific. And to do that, workers had to reach the top of the ridge. So in 1942, they built a route up, originally a wooden ladder and walkway driven up the cliffs, later rebuilt as metal steps, 3,922 of them, switchbacking up the ridgeline to the summit. The Navy used it to service the antenna for years. After the radio station was decommissioned, the stairs sat there and people started sneaking up, and it's not hard to see why. The steps are steel, ramped sections and ladder-like flights with handrails on both sides, bolted into the rock and the steep green slope. But the railings don't change what's underneath them. In long stretches, the ridge narrows to almost nothing. The staircase runs along the very crest with a sheer drop on either side, hundreds of feet down into the valleys. The trade winds hit the ridge head on. Clouds roll through constantly, and large sections of the climb are routinely swallowed in white where you can see the steps more than a few flights ahead. And it's slick. The Kulo Range is one of the wettest environments around. The metal is often wet, and the upper portions tilt steep enough that you're pulling on the rails as much as stepping. Sections were damaged by storms and erosion over the years and partially rebuilt. Climbing it was banned for decades, officially closed since the late 1980s, and a guard was eventually posted at the bottom, which did almost nothing to stop the steady stream of people climbing it at dawn to beat him. At the top, around 2,800 feet up, the ridge meets the old radio station site, and the view runs out across the whole windward side of Oahu. Kaneohe Bay, the reef shining through the water, the coastline curling away, and the rest of the Kula Range rising in folded green walls into the cloud. So here's how the most famous staircase on this list ends. After years of trespassing, injuries, rescues, and fights between the city and the surrounding neighborhood, the local government finally voted to remove the Haiku Stairs entirely. And in 2024, crews began doing exactly that, flying out the metal sections by helicopter, dismantling the stairway piece by piece from the top down. The stairway to heaven is being unbuilt. The staircase that earned its name touched the clouds and then disappeared from the mountain forever. If you thought these were unnerving, you're not going to believe our video on the world's most dangerous cliffside roads. Click here to watch, and I'll see you over